Hi again. I want to give you a very different way to think about the spiritual reality, to think about the infinite. First of all, before I go, how many of you have ever had a moment that felt deeper, wider, more real than ordinary life? We might call it a spiritual experience or an experience of a non-anxious presence. How many of you have ever had such an experience? Good. And what I'm going to tell you, by the way, is taken from my book, sort of, called Christianity Reimagined, and that is the only plug you're going to get. I have a couple of copies out there. So I want to tell you about one of my spiritual experiences. A few years ago, I was driving through the mountains of Colorado. It was a gorgeous, sunny afternoon. I was enjoying the pine-covered hillsides, the ranch houses, the waving wheat fields. At some point, something about the whole scene suddenly felt, I don't know, different. Somehow it was strange. So I pulled over to the shoulder and I got out of my car. Though it was a bright, sunny day, I sensed something almost like a thin cloud everywhere I looked. It was around everything. It wasn't exactly visible, but palpable, like I could almost twirl it between my fingers. It was very, very kinesthetic, very touchable. It spread over the split rail fences. It rested between the long horns of the cattle grazing in the fields. It drifted through the burbling stream and up the side of the mountain. I couldn't have missed it. And then I realized that this cloud-like stuff, something, wasn't only around things, it went right through them. It went through the cattle, through the ranch houses, through the granite mountains themselves. It was a hush, velvety, alive, and somehow intimate. It felt very close to me. It seemed to penetrate everything. And then suddenly I laughed out loud. Of course, I thought, if it goes through everything, it's got to go through me as well. The cloud through the mountain, cloud through the cattle, cloud through my chest. It felt a little like this. Okay, next slide. It felt a little like this. He's less bald than I am. And in that moment, the cattle, the fence posts, the gray granite mountains, and my own awareness felt like they were all the same underlying stuff. What was in the world was also in me. Have you ever had an experience like that, by the way, before I go on? Does this sound familiar to anybody? One hand. I'm getting a fair number of, maybe. Many people have had moments like this. Last time I was here, I mentioned that I interviewed more than 50 Christians who had undergone mystical experiences, but who did not believe the doctrines of Christianity. People I call mystics on the margins. Most describe spiritual experiences that were actually quite similar to mine. Not exactly the same, but quite similar. The Reverend Christina Rathbone spoke, for example, of sensing a profound being and at oneness while she was swimming in a river. Doug Kruschke, a facilitator in LA, Los Angeles, was in the Joshua Tree Desert when he experienced what he said was an impersonal presence greater than myself. Again and again, I heard about sensing some deeper reality permeating people and the world around them. One thing I noticed, by the way, was that they virtually never described this reality as anything like a person. This was not some human-like deity. This was more like a presence, a depth, a field. Paul Tillich, that you might be familiar with, called it the ground of being. Great phrase, the ground of being. And interestingly, people consistently described it as everywhere, omnipresent, deeply real, creative, not placid, alive, not just blank, but alive, and profoundly meaningful. Many also describe their spiritual moments as among the most loving and beautiful experiences of their lives. Is that what you would say about your spiritual experiences? They're really quite beautiful. They're remarkable experiences, and we always remember them. All right, next slide, Kenneth. Oh, don't hit that yet. Don't tell it to go yet. Normally, when people talk this way, we assume that we've left science far behind and entered the realm of poetry, mysticism, religion. But surprisingly, modern physics seems to point to something surprisingly similar. To tell you what I mean, I'm going to have to get a little geeky for a second. Trust me, I'll get back to the spiritual life soon. Modern physics tells us that underlying what we think of as solid matter is something much stranger than we once imagined. Beneath electrons, atoms, stars, planets, even beneath seemingly empty space, reality begins to look a lot less solid like things and more like fields of energy. Okay, Kenneth, can you show the next slide? Nope, not this one yet. An energy field, this will do. So magnets generate fields, and what I mean by a field is something that's invisible, extends through space, and can influence objects around them. But quantum physics points towards something even more fundamental, a kind of underlying energy field present everywhere in the universe. Some physicists call it the quantum vacuum field. And again, it's present everywhere. Despite the name vacuum, though, the field is anything but empty. So when physicists remove all the matter and energy from a chamber, something still remains. Tiny fluctuations of energy consistently appearing and disappearing at the quantum level. Okay, Kenneth, now the previous one. Can you make it go? This is the nature of these fields. These are tiny, 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 tiny particles. This is slowed way down. But these little particles coming into existence and then going out of existence are called virtual particles. Sorry, I couldn't remember that name. And they come into and out of existence. All right, Kenneth, that's enough. Thank you. The physicist John Wheeler called this restless activity quantum foam. Again, this vacuum field of quantum foam is present everywhere. Can you show the next slide, please? Quantum foam looks a little like this. Physicist Hal Puthoff says it's a wildly dynamic medium, more like the base of a waterfall than like placid empty space. And next slide, here are 3 artist renderings of this field. This is one, this is the second, this is the third. Different ways of conceiving of what this field looks like. Here's the important point. According to quantum theory, the particles that make up matter, those little tiny virtual particles, and then they become regular particles. They become electrons, photons, quarks, and ultimately us. And they emerge out of this deep field. Oop. That's ahead of me. In a sense, the universe arises out of an invisible energetic ground. Okay, now seen this way, doesn't the ground of being that the mystics describe and the quantum vacuum field that physicists describe start to sound oddly familiar and parallel? They clearly share some striking similarities. And here are the similarities. Both seem to be omnipresent. Both seem to be formless and yet capable of becoming form. Both are foundational at the root of things. Both are energetic in themselves. And somehow both underlie the visible world. Now, before I go on, I want to be very clear about one thing. I am not saying quantum physics proves mysticism. And I'm not saying that mysticism proves quantum physics. It doesn't. All I am saying is that the parallels are fascinating. All I'm saying is that the field that the mystics describe and the field that physicists describe share some striking similarities. But then things get even more interesting. Some scientists, including Nobel Prize-winning Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, have proposed a theory suggesting that consciousness itself, yours and mine, may be connected with quantum processes. The theory remains controversial and speculative, but even if it's partly true, it raises an extraordinary possibility that consciousness and this deeper field of reality may be intimately connected. And that brings us back to spiritual experience. Okay, next slide. Notice what I've added to this is both the mystics theory and also the quantum vacuum theory suggest that consciousness is connected with this field. And if you think back to my experience and some of your experiences, I experience that the animals and the fence posts and the ranch houses were connected with me at the level of my consciousness. And scientists are suggesting maybe consciousness itself is directly connected with this underlying field. What Christina sensed while she was swimming, what Doug sensed in the desert, what I sense on that fence rail in Colorado, it all sounds strangely similar to this idea of a pervasive underlying vacuum field. Maybe what I was sensing in Colorado was the quantum vacuum field. I was feeling myself being interpenetrated by what I experienced as a spiritual reality may have also been a quantum reality. I told you I was going to get back to spirituality eventually and stop being so geeky. Now I'm back to spirituality. Again, I'm not claiming proof here. I'm just claiming a possibility, a hypothesis, a wondering. Maybe the mystics and the physicists are approaching the same fundamental mystery from two different directions. One through subjective experience, the other through mathematics and experiment, that is to say, through objective means. However, there is one important difference. The quantum vacuum field described by physicists has no emotional quality. Physicists' instruments don't measure love, sorrow, awe, or joy. But we do. And spiritual experiences often carry a very powerful emotional tone. You're nodding, you know what I mean. Yes, spiritual experiences have a real joy that comes with them. Many people describe these experiences as moments of extraordinary openness, peace, connection, love. Many say they're among the most meaningful experiences of their lives. These are really cool experiences and they have a lot of joy to them. The Benedictine monk Bede Griffiths once wrote, "I encountered the void, and the void was love." To me, that's one of the most astonishing claims found across the world's spiritual tradition, and it's found virtually everywhere. In Hinduism, ultimate reality is described as Satchitananda, which means being, consciousness, and bliss. In Buddhism, enlightenment is described as liberation from suffering and profound compassion. These are very positive emotions. In Christianity, salvation is not merely believing certain doctrines. At its root, it means healing, wholeness, rescue, transformation, and love. Again and again, human beings report that when they encounter this deeper level of reality, it feels profoundly loving. So I'll repeat what Bede Griffiths says again. Okay, next slide, Kenneth. Nope, next one. Next one. I encountered the void, and the void was love. All right, let's go back one. So my claim is, the one on the right, you might be able to make it out. See these little dots and stuff over here? I understand. That's pointing to the fact that that's a drawing, and imagine an artist drawing of what this quantum vacuum field is like. The one on the left, the first one we saw, is what the ground of being is like. And what strikes me is how similar they are. We experience the spiritual reality subjectively, and we can understand the physicist's reality. What if our moments of unusual openness, connectedness, awe, stillness, and love are not meaningless? What if they reveal something real about the nature of existence itself? Maybe what people have called God is not a cosmic person standing outside the universe. Maybe it's the living depth that we can sometimes feel. Maybe it's the presence within reality. The reality flowing through the mountains, the cattle, the fence posts, and through us. Maybe it really is, as one of the great sayings from the Upanishads has it, Tattvamasi, thou, you art that. And this that is love. Amen.